It's time for the week 5 waiver wire pickups. Welcome into the Football Guys Fantasy Football Show. I'm Alfredo Brown, joined as always. I've got Dave Kluge with me. And today we're going to be looking through a bunch of the players you guys need to be looking at on the waiver wire. We're recording this Monday morning, so we don't know who's going to be available after the Monday Night Football game. Maybe some big waiver wire pickups you need to make there. But Dave, week 4 brings us a whole new slate of players. I wouldn't say that we've necessarily had some of the big waiver wire pickups. We had Trey Benson last week. It looks like we maybe have another name this week, but he's already pretty heavily rostered. I'm talking about Woody Marks, running back for the Houston Texans.
Yeah, I think he's the number one guy. I mean, we're just seeing that slow changing of the guard where a rookie is taking over a veteran's job. Talked about it last week, but like the trend has continued. In week 1, it was 85-15 split between Chubb and Woody Marks, then an 80-20 split, then a 60-40 split. And last week, the table flipped. 40% of the touches going Nick Chubb's way, 60% of the touches going Woody Marks' way. And Woody Marks just looked better. Like he's got juice right now that Nick Chubb doesn't. I'm happy that Nick Chubb is able to still have an NFL career after the injuries that he has sustained. But I mean, Woody Marks just looks like such a better running back right now, getting it done in pass protection as well. He's receiving the ball. He's running between the tackles. He's getting outside. He was a player that I really liked at USC last year. And it just seems like right now, there was hope that it would be Joe Mixon, and that didn't work out. There was hope that it would be Nick Chubb, and that didn't work out. Woody Marks is the next man up, and he looks good. So he's that guy. If he's still available in your league, drop a lot of fab on him, like 80, 90%. It seemed like the whole Texans offense looked a little bit better as Woody Marks got more involved. So this kid could be what they need, like get a good running back to get this team back on track.
Yeah, the role for Marks has grown every single week, up to a 56% snap share this last week. I'll say this, the Texans running back room probably won't see a combined 30 rush attempts, for Woody Marks and Nick Chubb again. This was a very particular game where they're going up against the Titans and they're going to have a lead. But that's not a reason to not invest in Woody Marks, because a lot of his value comes in the passing game. Like this was a guy who was a very good pass catching back coming out of USC. Right now, Woody Marks last week, he was second in targets on the team with the Houston Texans, tied with Nico Collins at 5 targets for the game. They got Baltimore next week, who have been very, very giving to fantasy running backs. So this could be, we could be looking at Woody Marks being on the precipice of having the big breakout game. Like all it takes is one big run, and all of a sudden, if people aren't putting a lot of their money on Woody Marks this week, everyone's going to be doing it the following week.
Yeah, and I think he already had the breakout. I mean, he looked darn good last week. I'd say that it's already here. And I
I'm
know
saying
he's
like
not.
one of those like the big obnoxious ones where it's like, oh, Woody Marks ran for 120 yards and scored 2 touchdowns. How did we not see this coming? Like one of those where
I mean, he had
it's
119 yards and 2 touchdowns yesterday. So I'd say it's pretty darn close.
All right, Dave, let's go to the next guy on the list here, because another running back that I think a lot of people are going to be going out to look at, Kenneth Gainwell, is another running back that I think, has this massive game. I do pause for a second with Gainwell, because I do worry that it could be the fool's gold that Jaylen Warren comes back, and we obviously don't see the same type of workload for him. He is a good handcuff running back for you to have. Like he is the good injury away running back for you to have. They get a bye next week. Jaylen Warren's likely back. They get Cleveland in week 6, which has been really tough for running backs. I know we saw Jahmyr Gibbs have his big game here for the Lions. Also, is there anything there that worries you with Kenneth Gainwell, or are you putting a good waiver fab bid on him?
He's somebody that I've rostered in a lot of leagues already just because I knew the upside was there if Warren had to miss, but I didn't expect him to do what he did this week. That was just absolutely insane. Like, I don't think we're going to see that sort of upside again, but he had a pretty steady role, 53% of the snaps in week 1, 42% in week 2. That dipped a little bit, 26% in week 3, but he's been steadily involved. I think you are right, though, that once Jaylen Warren is back, we're going to see Kenneth Gainwell go back to the role where he was, where he's the clear RB2 on the team. You're hoping that he can score a touchdown to kind of pay off. That being said, this Steelers offense, they didn't have a single pass attempt that went more than 15 yards downfield. And we talked about this coming into the week, that it is a running back, tight end sort of team here. Like they are just featuring the running backs and tight ends in the passing game and not even getting the ball to the receivers all that much outside of that huge DK Metcalf catch and run on the slant. Love to see that. Good for you, DK. But I think that there could be some standalone value value here in PPR, but just to like tell you how I feel about this, before the game kicked off, like I was awake at my desk at 6 a.m. yesterday, saw Kenneth Gainwell was available in the league, and my opponent needed a running back. So I dropped Kendre Miller for Kenneth Gainwell. And yeah, Kenneth
Oof.
Gainwell went nuts on my bench. But
Yeah.
like in hindsight, I'd rather have Kendre Miller at this point than I would Kenneth Gainwell.
And I think I'm in the same spot. So let's talk about him now. Because Kendre Miller is available in roughly 93% of leagues. We
Mhm.
saw his biggest workload of the season. The role for him has grown every week. Alvin Kamara has been a guy that's been sort of a speculative trade candidate. I think most of that is just, people watching saying, oh, he's old, get him out of there. The Saints are rebuilding anyways. Go put him on a team like the Chiefs or something like that, right? There could be truth to that. And even if there isn't, we're seeing the role for Kendre Miller grow, where this could be one of those things where he just sort of takes over the ground game role and Alvin Kamara is just relegated to passing down stuff.
Yeah, and that's kind of already what's happening a little
Right.
bit. I mean, Alvin Kamara was still involved yesterday, but Kendre Miller, frankly, just looks like a better runner right now between the tackles. And Kamara can do things downfield and in the passing game that Kendre can't. But I do think that we might see a trade, and it feels like we've been speculating about an Alvin Kamara trade for years now, and it's never come to fruition. But this could be the year. But yeah, Kendre Miller, just a big fan of the talent. 23 years old, an early round 3 pick, and we talked about it for years, kind of tongue in cheek, that Dennis Allen just did not like him, would bench him for no reason, like publicly besmirch his name in press conferences, talking about how he's struggling to stay healthy. All these just like very unprofessional things that he was saying about his running back. So seems like Kellen Moore likes him quite a bit more. We're seeing that role grow every single week, and just still a very young guy with a lot of talent that's finally getting his opportunity. Kendre Miller, I mean, I don't think it's crazy to say that he's like a must roster player in every format now, because whether Alvin Kamara gets hurt or traded, the ceiling is just so high for him.
Well, I think that's the thing you want to look for with these players first, right? Is do they have standalone value? And that's what Kendre Miller has right now. He has standalone value without some sort of injury to Kamara or a trade with Kamara. So if those were to happen, I kind of think you have to look at Kendre Miller in the same way you look at a guy like Trey Benson, if not maybe even better, because he might take over a massive role on a team that's going to have to pass a lot. So yeah, Kendre Miller must roster waiver wire pickup this week. Let's go to the next guy. And this is a name that is probably not very familiar to a lot of people. But I guess after this last week, he will be. And it's Xavier Scott, running back for the Minnesota Vikings, Dave, who is available in 97% of leagues. We saw him kind of take over the Aaron Jones role here,
Mhm.
where he was a major passing role for him in the Vikings offense. 7 targets, 23 routes run on 29 snaps. Aaron Jones could be out for another 2 weeks, could be another 4 weeks, could be longer. We're not quite sure. Um, we were talking before the show is that I don't still quite know what the Vikings are. Their offense has obviously had its ups and downs with different quarterbacks playing. The defense has had their ups and downs. It almost feels like they're bad when Andrew Van Ginkel is out of the lineup, and then they're good when he is in there. Um, I still think we don't know enough about this team, and they might not be leading every single game and being able to pound the rock like we thought they might. And Xavier Scott could actually be one of these very reasonable, like RB3 desperate flex plays because of the passing upside in certain weeks.
Yeah, and I do think, we're expecting Aaron Jones to come back in about 3 weeks. They've got the bye in 2 more weeks
Yep.
before Aaron Jones is set to return from IR. And I think that's just going to push Xavier Scott to the back burner, unfortunately. But I am such a big fan of these converted wide receivers. Like, they never really pan out, but Antonio Gibson, Tyrone Tracy, like, still keeping a light on for these guys in case it ever does. And we saw like an unreal toe tap touchdown in the back of an end zone. You don't see that often from running backs. He was also getting some deep wheel routes downfield, but we've seen that in this offense with Aaron Jones. Like, he is running wheel routes 40, 50 yards downfield and getting targeted there. So not all that uncommon to see a running back getting that sort of usage here. But I think this is like a band-aid over the next 2 games that like
Yeah.
maybe you could put him in there if you're absolutely desperate. But as soon as Aaron Jones returns, I think that he is just going to be cast to the wayside. So not going crazy for Xavier Scott. I think the major takeaway here is that people thought that Jordan Mason was just going to be this like plug and play RB1, getting 100% of the opportunities while Aaron Jones was out. And that's not the way that they want to split this up. And we saw Kevin O'Connell last year lean pretty heavily on Aaron Jones. Doesn't sound like he wants to put that same trust in Jordan Mason. So maybe, especially with these 2 really tough matchups coming up for the Vikings, maybe pump the brakes on Jordan Mason a little bit in your rankings.
Yeah, I think for Xavier Scott, he's a guy that maybe if you lost Aaron Jones and you haven't been able to adequately replace him, and you're just kind of really, really getting desperate at running back. He's one of those guys you can think about. A couple of other players on here that are pretty widely available. Emari Demercado, we just brought his name up briefly last week. Wasn't a big role for him in this last game, but also just not a lot of rushing attempts for the Cardinals in general. 11 running back rush attempts for the Cardinals, but Demercado gets the receiving usage. 17 routes and 26 snaps, gets a touchdown. Just strictly handcuff at this point, right?
Yeah, I think so. And like maybe if you're like really desperate in a PPR league and the Cardinals have a matchup where you know they'll be trailing, you could put him in there because he was getting a lot of the 2 minute work and he was getting a lot of the third down work. And we were hoping that that would all go to Trey Benson because Trey Benson's a very good pass catcher and he did have more targets than Demercado, but so much value from these pass catching running backs comes in the ability to get on the field in 2 minute drills where you know you could just march down the field and gobble up 3, 4, 5 catches against a soft defense on a single drive. And if Demercado is taking that role, that would put a cap on Benson's ceiling. Now, hopefully, they're just saying like this is Trey Benson's first start ever. We don't want to put too much on his plate, and we'll see that change. But I think Demercado is more of a cap on Trey Benson than he is anybody with any standalone value you're going to want in fantasy. So in your super deep league, sure, sprinkle a few bucks on him and kind of hold him as an injury away stash. But Demercado is probably not a guy that I'm itching to get in my lineup anytime soon.
Next guy on here, and this is because we saw an injury last night where Miles Sanders left the game with an ankle injury. So Jaydon Blue makes this list, and a lot of people are still holding on to him. And by the way, like I am a lot of people. I'm contributing to the 24% of fantasy managers still holding on to Jaydon Blue despite being a healthy scratch. Just wish casting things into fruition here. But Miles Sanders leaves the game with an ankle injury. And Dave, their other running back is actually a fullback, Hunter Lipke. And the Cowboys really don't have much else in that backfield outside of Javonte Williams, who, by the way, not in any danger of losing his job, not in any danger of losing snaps. It's probably more so just to keep him fresh. But they get the Jets next week, Carolina and Washington, two games that could require a little bit more passing. You know, the Cowboys, they are number 2 in pass play percentage throughout the season. So there's kind of a glimmer of hope here that Jaydon Blue has some fantasy relevance with Miles Sanders out.
Potentially, I'd like to see him activated before I can get too excited about him. I mean, there's a lot of injuries in this backfield.
Do you think
Phil Mappa is on IR as well.
Do you think they're not going to activate him, or they're just going to keep running with Hunter Lipke as the backup running back here?
I think they might activate him if Miles Sanders has to miss any time.
If they can't activate him now, like all hope is gone.
Right. I think what we're going to see, though, is just where it's been kind of like an 80-20 split with Javonte Williams and Miles Sanders. I think that if Jaydon Blue is activated, he'll be watching from the sidelines. Well, it's like 100% Javonte Williams unless he gets hurt. And then they're kind of like desperate where they need to put Jaydon Blue out there. The coach's comments haven't been too great, talking about him like struggling with consistency and whatnot. I think if they got to the point where like, Miles Sanders has to miss extended time, Phil Maffa's still on IR, then Javonte Williams goes down, they'd probably start looking at a free agent or a trade, I think, before they'd really lean on Jaydon Blue as their guy. This is just me being a Jaydon Blue hater, though.
Yeah, I was about to say, man, like you really went from like, should we pick him up to I don't think he's even going to play ever.
Yeah, like in your deep leagues, dynasty leagues, I think he's worth a stash, but I just don't, I have some concerns about the size, and the limitations. We talked about it a lot during the draft process. I think he's like a very good outside runner, but I don't think he's a guy that an NFL team wants to rely on for 15, 18, 20 touches per game because he can't do a lot in between the tackles. And that's where the strength of this Cowboys offensive line is.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think any NFL team really wants to. I mean, there's very few NFL teams that want to rely on anyone for 20 touches in a game.
Right.
The Cowboys did that with Javonte Williams this past night because they had to. I don't think they want to keep doing that with him either. I'm not saying Jaydon Blue becomes this guy you have to go run out and grab, but his ability on passing downs, I would say it's still probably an 80-20 Javonte Williams split, with Hunter Lipke working in there, and Jaydon Blue getting some of the part of that 20 that's remaining. But nevertheless, a guy to have with an open spot in a backfield for the Cowboys. Two other guys here. Last one, Emanuel Wilson, just a name to throw out there because we need to keep an eye on the Josh Jacobs knee injury. I know he left, he came back, but then Emanuel Wilson started to take some more snaps for the Packers as the game went on. They do have their bye week coming up, and then they have Cincinnati in week 7. So, there's I wouldn't say there's like a ton that I really want to like put on Emanuel Wilson or put a lot of stock into his position there. I think it's just something to keep an eye on the Josh Jacobs thing.
Yeah, and I don't. I'm trying to find information on this Josh Jacobs injury this morning, and like the more I searched, the more confused I got. Did you see? He said he's like, "Oh, I just have a hole in my knee. Like it's no big deal. I just have a hole in my knee,
I
and it's going to be there for a while." What does that mean? like,
I have no idea.
like I'm reading it right now. Josh Jacobs said he got stitches on his right knee after being cleated on the touchdown run, and he said there is a quote hole in his knee, and that it will be quote there for a while. So
Okay.
that's it. Yeah, he got
I
a
mean, no,
cleat
that's
through his
exactly
knee,
it.
and he's got a
You made
hole
it
in.
sound like he had a hole like burrowed through his knee. It's just he's a gash. He got stitches. He's
Yeah.
good.
So yeah, I
Okay.
don't think there's no ligament damage, no joint damage, anything like that. But I think the promising sign and why, like we were talking about a pre-show. Fantasy managers have gotten good. Like the average fantasy football player has gotten very good. Like we haven't seen a lot of these. Like I feel like 5 years ago when James Conner went down, like Trey Benson would have been available in 98% of leagues and everybody's spending their fab on him. But like people know to get ahead of the curve now. And no, there's no concern that Josh Jacobs is going to miss time. But I think what we saw yesterday is that Emanuel Wilson is the very clear RB2 here. And like early in the season, we saw some Chris Brooks. He's only had one touch in the last 2 weeks. So Emanuel Wilson, like standalone value, hoping Josh Jacobs is going to miss time. No, that's not what we're talking about here. It's just that this is a proactive pickup. You get Emanuel Wilson on your team now so that if Josh Jacobs does get injured, you don't have to get in a fab bidding war for him.
Let's go to our last running back on here. Justice Hill, running back for the Ravens, available in 89% of leagues. Dave, he gets a big run towards the end of the game here, but heavy passing game usage. And this is something we're not used to seeing, but the Ravens trailing and the Ravens just overall not being that great this year. Two, I'd say relatively tough upcoming matchups here for at least a running back position. Houston Texans, Rams, then a bye. Is this something where you're thinking Justice Hill needs to be rostered, or like, at least in my opinion, I feel like we have seen this song and dance before. We'll get the big Justice Hill game. He gets a few pass catches, and then we're saying, he's good to roster. And then Derrick Henry just does Derrick Henry things and like never misses a game. This might be different though if we're looking at time off for Lamar Jackson, who also has an injury.
Yeah, and I think like in hindsight, maybe we could have kind of seen this coming. Like Justice Hill, his biggest games last year came against Kansas City, where he had 8 targets and had himself a nice game. And then he had another big game when they played against Buffalo, where he had 6 targets and had a big game. And then he had another big game against Pittsburgh and another big game against Philadelphia. So it's like when they play good teams, that's when Justice Hill has to get into the lineup. Now, can you predict when these games are going to happen, where the Ravens are going to be trailing? No, you really can't. But I think that it's very obvious that like when the Ravens are in a close game or when they have the lead, they are going to give the ball to Derrick Henry in the second half and eat up the clock. And when they're trailing, they don't trust Derrick Henry to be out there, to be that passing down guy, to be the pass blocking guy. And that's what Justice Hill comes in. So I think this is another one of those, like if you're super, super desperate in a certain matchup in a PPR league and you need to plug Justice Hill in through bye weeks, you can luck into one of these game scripts that are friendly to his skill set. But I think the more reasonable takeaway here is that we haven't seen Keaton Mitchell at all this year. Justice Hill is the clear RB2 here. And if Derrick Henry were to miss any time, I think we'd see Justice Hill have that contingent injury away upside that we're always chasing.
Now, Dave, we went through all the running backs here. It really feels like it's a running back heavy week, but there
Yeah.
are some wide receivers that we can pay attention to. First one, not even on the show sheet, but just like someone to mention because of how things went last night. Romeo Doubs is a guy that if he is out there, I think you're paying attention. It's another one of these players that I kind of look at and I say, sure, do I want to roster him? Yeah. Will I ever know when to start him? Because that's what the Packers wide receiver room is like. No. Like you really don't. And then I hate to be that person, but like we've seen some good matchups for him. And then we've seen 2 targets, 4 targets, 5 targets. Like we never quite see that target volume. We get to see the blow up this week with the 3 touchdowns. But then they go into a bye. And I think it's going to be kind of hard to justify spending a lot on a guy like Romeo Doubs going into a bye and us really not knowing what the workload or what the target volume is ever really going to be.
Yeah, this whole Packers wide receiver room is tough to get a read on, but Dobbs doesn't come off the field. Like he has been that guy for the last couple of years. Like we're always chasing the shiny new toy and Dontavian Wicks and Jaden Reed and Matthew Golden this year, but like Doubs really has that X receiver role locked down. And when it comes to moving the chains and when it comes to getting into the red zone, that's where they focus on him. So it makes him a very volatile player because he could have these huge blow up weeks where he scores a bunch of touchdowns. But when he's not scoring a touchdown, you're usually getting like 3 catches for 27 yards. So I
Yeah.
think that's the issue here is like it is very, very boomer bust for Doubs. But yeah, in a best ball league, like where you don't have to worry about it, like if you're in a best ball league with waivers, Doubs is a guy that you're splashing a ton of money on because the variance could always break in his direction on any given week. Deep leagues, dynasty leagues. I started him in SFB this week. Like in your deep league, sure, Doubs has a lot of value, but probably not a guy like in your standard 10, 12 team league that you want to be firing up on a weekly basis.
Yeah, and we saw him do this a bit last year as well, where he'll go and have the big game last year, week 6, week 7, wide receiver 9, wide receiver 15, and then you've got 4 consecutive weeks of being outside the top 45 wide receivers. Like it's just
Exactly.
that's kind of what we've gotten used to with Romeo Doubs. So I wouldn't go out there and spend a ton on him.
Much better football player than he is a fantasy
Yes.
asset. Like really
Yes.
important for what they do. He's great at blocking, great at moving the chains. He's just kind of got like a beacon in him to like pick up that first down when they need to, but not a guy that gets the volume we really care about for fantasy.
Right. And I think with all of these waiver wire pickups, we want to pick the guys like, could he be more, right? Have we seen what their limit is? And some of the names that are here, Dave, this one almost feels like I just have to put it because of what happened to the Giants wide receiver room, losing Malik Neighbors. Wan'Dale Robinson is going to be a guy that if he's available, obviously go and just put fab on him because he'll probably be the lead target earner in this offense, but he's way too heavily rostered for us to talk about him in this episode. Darius Slayton becomes the other guy to bring up here. And I wouldn't say that I'm advocating to go and get Darius Slayton, but I felt like we needed to talk about him because he's available in 95% of leagues. He's almost always in the field in 2 wide receiver sets. He's on the field in 3 wide receiver sets. Highest target per route run amongst Giants wide receivers in week 4. Obviously, the ones not named Malik Neighbors. I just don't think we know what we're going to have with Jaxson Dart under center. And I don't think we quite know like what the pecking order even is for this offense. I think we would assume it's still Wan'Dale Robinson, but we don't really know what the tendencies are for Jaxson Dart.
Yeah, I think it's mostly going to be Wan'Dale Robinson, and I think it's also going to be a very low volume passing attack. We only saw 20 pass attempts in this matchup. He completed 13 of those. So I struggle to buy into any of these receivers here. Like Russell Wilson, for all of his faults and the interceptions and the errant throws and the poor decision making and all that. I mean, at least he could throw the ball a lot and he could throw it downfield and he could occasionally connect with these guys. And you might get that from Dart as well, but I think it's just going to be so much more volatile on a week in and week out basis. So yeah, Darius Slayton might be the wide receiver 1 here, but I think Wan'Dale Robinson is probably getting more touches. I think we're going to see a lot more work for the running backs out of the backfield. Cam Scatterbo and Tyrone Tracy, when he returns, are both very good pass catchers. Theo Johnson, it seems like he's got a little bit of a connection with Jaxson Dart as well. So I understand like there's excitement about Darius Slayton. But this is another one of those that like if I'm ever putting Darius Slayton in my lineup, I feel like something just went badly wrong. And like if I'm counting on Darius Slayton catching passes from Jaxson Dart, probably not a spot that I want to be in.
Do you want to just talk about the Giants here? Because we've got Jaxson Dart and Theo Johnson on the show sheet
No,
here, but we might as well just
Dart
keep talking
I am
about
excited
him.
about. Yeah, Dart I am excited about.
Okay, I'm not, but I want to hear your side of it because I'm not. It's completing 13 passes, 111 yards. I get there's the rushing upside.
It's as simple as that. I mean, like this guy
But
could be
there's a
like a
lot
Tim
to
Tebow
it.
type of player. Like he had 1,498 rushing yards over his last 3 years at Ole Miss. That is solely where my argument lies. I'm not going to
Yeah.
say anything about his passing or the playmakers around him, but like this guy can rush for 150 yards and 2 touchdowns on any given week, and that alone makes him a streamable option.
Streamable option. So this is basically if you are in the business of rostering 2 quarterbacks.
Right.
And you're hoping for some big rushing games from Jaxson Dart. Let's do this. I want to look ahead at what some of the games that he has coming up where we think he might be streamable. Is that fair to do?
Sure.
So next week against New Orleans, is he streamable?
Yeah, it's a bad defense, and that offense can put up points, might push them into a spot where he's got to run a little bit. Yeah.
Okay. This is where it gets tough because the next 4 weeks, Philly, Denver, Philly again, San Francisco.
Probably not in any of those matchups, but if he looks like really good
I
against
didn't
New
know. I didn't
Orleans,
know that those were the matchups prior to looking this up.
oh,
I
the
wanted to
Giants
see
have
when he.
the Giants have the hardest schedule of any team this year. And that's why, like, I kind of saw week 4 as like maybe this is when they'll push Jaxson Dart out there. But yeah, it is a murderer's row for the next like 2 months. And that was kind of the thing. Like I spent so much time this offseason looking at the Giants schedule, trying to figure out when Dart would come in. And I couldn't really figure it out because even after that San Francisco game, like they don't really have a break in the schedule. It is just one tough game after another. Like this is going to be tough sledding for Jaxson Dart. Like he is very much so like they're just going to find out if he can sink or swim this year.
Yeah, and I'll say this because I think I heard a lot of the Tim Tebow comps, which is I think are just they're funny but also kind of accurate. I had also heard like the Drake May comps of like, well,
Mhm.
Drake May was rushing a lot too, and the big arm and all the Drake May was completing a lot more passes. He was attempting a lot more passes. This was a very different, like the offense seemed still very simplified for Jaxson Dart on purpose. I know that's the same kind of offense he came out of at Ole Miss, make the one reads. He does have the potential. He does have the potential to be a better quarterback. And I think what it is, it's a lot of hit your first read or take off. And I'm going to be intrigued to see how that works against some of these better defenses. I think the Giants, like we kind of saw everything get a lot. They won, which is still crazy. Is like they win. They were not nearly as efficient, and it might just be ugly wins. Like it might actually be ugly wins, sort of like no, I wasn't. I was gonna say Blake Bortles. That was the exact opposite. He was good for fantasy and bad
And
for
he was
football.
launching like 500 yards a game.
Yeah, yeah. I kind of wonder if this is just gonna be ugly wins. Like Cam Scatterby was not efficient either, but it was just, hey, let's just keep spamming the same couple things. How this team reacts to losing Malik Neighbors is going to be very interesting going forward.
Which, if you watch Ole Miss's offense last year, that's a lot of what they did. Like, scheming up a touch for Trey Harris, and if he's not
RPO,
open, just tuck it and run. And like that's a
yeah.
lot of what we saw last year from Jaxson Dart as well. And he can run that offense. I think they could open the playbook up a little bit more every single week. But like you talk about, the schedule coming up is just so brutal. But yeah, I mean, I'm looking at him in the streamer discussion, like in my rest of season rankings. I'd prefer Bo Nix, Jared Goff, Drake May, Kyler Murray, Brock Purdy, all those guys. But like I'm at the point right now where for me, like he's in the same tier as Trevor Lawrence. I would prefer him ahead of CJ
Okay.
Stroud. Like,
Yeah.
and it's again, like it is very much so like you've got like your 6 or 7, maybe 8 plug and play QB1s. And I think outside of those guys, everybody else is kind of in that streamer discussion. And I think that Jaxson Dart did enough last week that we can throw him into that weekly conversation as well. But I think that like the big thing, it'll be how he looks this week against New Orleans. Because if he comes out looking really good about against New Orleans, then we'll have a little bit more faith plugging him in against those tougher matchups in the future.
Yeah. I think I'm still just like I just want my one quarterback and that's fine. I don't want to have to roster two. I'm so pilled on rostering as many of these backup running backs as possible. Theo Johnson was the other guy from this Giants offense who he gets the little flip pass in for the touchdown. Um, could he be a guy that benefits from Malik Neighbors not being on the field? I'd say this is more of a stash tight end situation that maybe has some upside, but um, it's not it's not exciting, I would say.
Yeah, and I think it's not even so much Malik Neighbors being out as it is Jaxson Dart being the starter. We see this all the time where these like young guys kind of build a connection and a chemistry throughout camp, and maybe we're seeing a little bit of that right now. Theo Johnson's also dealt with injuries throughout his career, but like you go pull up this guy's player profiler page, like just off the charts athleticism, like
Yeah.
6'6", 260 pounds, just like a freak athlete. And like if you want to make the job easy for your young quarterback, draw up passes to get the ball to Theo Johnson where he can just create after the catch. So yeah, very much so a stash. I'm not putting Theo Johnson in any week 5 lineups, but definitely worth a stash with this change in the offense that we're seeing in New York.
All right, so let's move on from the Giants. There's another player I want to throw in here, and it's a name we've brought up before, but now it actually seems like there's a little bit more to the noise that actually brings some value. And Isaiah Bond, 98% available in fantasy leagues on Sleeper. The target volume's growing every single week, Dave. He's already playing in both 2 and 3 wide receiver sets. Cedric Tillman leaves this game with a hamstring injury, and we're not sure how long that's going to be, but Isaiah Bond, he led the team in receiving yards this last week. We don't quite know if this Browns team, how long they're going to stick with Joe Flacco and what that could mean. Um, but I mean, Isaiah Bond is a talented player. He was the leading wide receiver at Texas until he got hurt ahead of Matthew Golden. Likely would have been a second round pick had it not been for a lot of legal stuff and allegations going on. Is this a guy that we could actually see have some real value on a pretty, I don't want to say bad, but just a not exciting Browns offense?
Yeah, I think this is one where like I'm going to see a lot of my league mates going after the Darius Slaytons and the Xavier Scotts and a lot of the guys that we've talked about, and I'm going to be okay just like putting in that $0 bid on Isaiah Bond and
Yeah.
getting him for free after waivers run because I don't think that he's on a lot of people's radar. But we got to remember like he joined right before the season kicked off, like did not get a full training camp under his belt. We're just seeing him slowly every single week improving a little bit. We know the athleticism's there, but he's also has the rare combination of athleticism and deep ball tracking skills. So like when they throw the ball to him late, he can come down with it. Just a very, very good player. And this wide receiver room is wide open. Like Jerry Jeudy does not look good. Like you talk about Cedric Tillman picking up an injury as well. Would not surprise me one bit if we just see Isaiah Bond take over as that wide receiver one in this offense.
All right. Last two players that I want to talk about here before we get to the drops. There are some other tight ends, rookie tight ends here. Oronde Gadsden II for the Chargers, 90% available, and Elijah Arroyo for the Seattle Seahawks, 93% available. I think both of us lean the same way here. It's Oronde Gadsden II, right? Who you'd be interested in out of these two, but I think they're both intriguing.
Yeah, I mean, it was disappointing to see the target total fall off a little bit after that big week 3 breakout. Guys had only had 3 targets last week, I think like 16 yards or something like that. A very good player, but there's just so many mouths to feed in this offense. Like Hampton is getting going now. We see like Lad McConkey can't even get enough to make him fantasy relevant. I find it hard to envision a world where Rodney Gadsden can. I mean, Quentin Johnson, like I think we might start to have a conversation about like him being the most valuable wide receiver in the Chargers right now. He has looked very
crazy.
good.
It's
like,
Quentin Johnston pulling like 13 targets a game is just not on the bingo card, kids.
yeah, like running nice routes, like catching contested balls
Yeah.
downfield. Like he is developing. Like we're seeing
Yeah.
that year 3 breakout. So I like Gadsden. He's a fun player. He's got the NFL bloodlines that we like. His dad was a wide receiver in the NFL. For those that aren't aware, but I just think like the best case scenario is that he's going to be like 4th on this team in targets. I think he'd probably need like multiple injuries to really find a path to fantasy relevance.
With how bad the tight end landscape is, though, like, is
Yeah,
he or
I get it.
Arroyo like worth it? Because I mean, the snap rate nearly doubled, right? Even though the targets didn't go up, the snap rate nearly doubled. I'm curious about that, like where because next couple weeks, sorry, Washington and Miami both pretty bad against the tight end, and that's where I get a little bit more intrigued. I have him rostered. I'm not starting him, or like, would you ever feel comfortable starting him?
No, no. I
No.
mean, we'd need to see like a drastic change in usage. But again, like my take on the tight ends is very similar to my take on the quarterbacks that like you've got 6 guys that you're feeling really good about that you're plugging and playing every single week. And then once you get past that, like, yeah, we're seeing like Kyle Pitts looks hot right now, and Hunter Henry has had back-to-back good games, and
Yeah.
yeah, but I lump those guys in with Mark Andrews and Travis Kelsey and T.J. Hawkinson and Dallas Goedert and Dalton Kincaid and Zach Ertz and Juwan Johnson. Like I could just keep going down the list. Like they're all just kind of streamers for me, and I think that's where Gadsden is as well, or where
All
he'll
right.
hope to be, I should say.
Yeah. Okay. Let's go to the players that we're considering dropping right now because this name might surprise people, and there's a stretch of games coming up that look good for him, and I just don't even know that we're all that interested anymore in Calvin Ridley, Dave.
Yeah,
It's when you put this name on the show sheet, you said I know it's spicy, but we got to talk about it, and you're right, 100%. 54% snap share this week. 3 targets. He's not even the leading target earner on his team anymore. He's not even the leading snap receiver for the team. Like he's behind both Tyler Lockett and Alec Iomanner. And I won't directly quote Cam Ward when he was asked about the team, but to paraphrase, he said they are cheeks right now. And I don't know that I want a guy who's not the leading snap earner, not the leading target earner on a offense that is this bad at the moment.
Yeah, I mean he's a wide receiver 70 right now. That is just
Yeah.
so bad. And I don't want to like try to get into the psychology of Calvin Ridley too much, but based on like what we've seen throughout his NFL career, he's a very like emotional player. Like when he's playing well and the team around him is doing well, he looks like one of the best wide receivers in football. And when things aren't going well, we see him get in his own head and we struggle a lot. And I just, barring a trade, I just don't see Calvin Ridley really being a guy in this Titans offense that we see stepping up and being fantasy relevant.
Yeah, I'm the same spot with you. Even on a good like, even if he turns it around, what does
Mhm.
turning it around look like? Does it look like a guy that you're willing to start every week as a top 3 wide receiver on your team? Is he a guy that you're flexing? Or is he a guy that becomes kind of a roster clogger where you just have him on your bench and you say, well, yeah, but my bench is pretty sweet though. I got Calvin Ridley, right? And then like you never actually play him. I feel like that's kind of the territory he's in where someone's going to add him and either start him and it's going to bum you out, or you're not going to start him and you just kind of keep him there and it's a roster clogger. You're going to end up dropping him for someone later.
Yeah, and that's exactly it. Like if I've got Calvin Ridley right now, the upside case just isn't there for him. So a lot of the guys that we've talked about today, Kendre Miller or an Emmanuel Wilson or a Blake Corum, who still just like keeps carving out a bigger role every single week. I'd prefer all of those guys right now to Calvin Ridley.
A couple other guys that are on this list. Cedric Tillman, I mentioned him earlier. He's got the hamstring injury. Darnell Mooney, another name to put on here. And this is another one been dealing with injury. Um,
By next
hamstring.
week, I believe, too, right?
Let me just double check that. Yes, they have the bye next week, and they have Buffalo, San Francisco, Miami. Um, but this is a hamstring injury, and this is these soft tissue injuries. They do often tend to take multiple weeks to heal, so we might not see Darnell Mooney out there. If you have an IR spot, obviously just put him on IR. But even then, Dave, it just hasn't been. It hasn't looked good. Even in an 11 target game for Mooney, it hasn't looked good. I think that it's safe to say Drake London and Bijan Robinson are the two top weapons on this offense, and even Kyle Pitts is coming around. Like I just don't think there's that chemistry right now for Mooney with Penix in this offense.
Yeah, I think Drake London is just healthy again, and that's what this came down to. I saw a lot
Yeah,
of people panicking about Drake London. Like when he came back in week 2 with 4 targets, it's like we do not see that. Like Drake London is not a four
and
target
we
per
talked
game
about it.
type
Don't
of
panic.
player,
Yep.
right? And people were really panicking, and then we see Darnell Mooney coming in and pulling 11 targets. Like that was just a function of Drake London being injured. Now that Drake London is healthy, Kyle Pitts is healthy, Bijan Robinson getting involved in the pass catching game, I just don't think there's enough left over for Mooney. So yeah, okay, moving off of him.
Yeah. Anyone else you want to throw in here? I think we're good.
A lot of tight ends. There's so many guys,
Just
and like
every
we
tight end.
basically, but like how many people last year spent a bunch of fab on Isaiah Likely and then kept him rostered all year because they said, well, I spent 85% of my fab in week 1. And the reality was Isaiah Likely was the tight end 25 from week 2 through week 18. And
Yeah.
now Juwan Johnson, like really good week 1. You spent a lot of fab on him. I get it. His target total has gone down every single week since week 1. David Njoku right now, he's getting out targeted and outplayed by Harold Fannin. So I think you're just at that point where there's a lot of sunk cost fallacy going on with a lot of these tight ends because you drafted them expecting them to be a tight end 1, or you picked them up early hoping that they'd be a tight end 1 over the rest of the season, and just keep churning. Like if you don't have one of those top guys, just keep churning tight ends and kind of play in these 2-3 week pockets where wide receivers are injured or good matchups or whatever. There are no plug and play options once you get past like the Jake Ferguson and that tier of tight ends.
Yeah, I mean, one thing you guys can all do is you can head over to footballguys.com and check out our strength of schedule tool that we have there. And you can see the pockets where these tight ends are going to be good to stream. Like, for example, you mentioned Juwan Johnson as a guy that you can drop. Looking weeks 6 through 10, he's got a good schedule. But like next week is going to be rough. This past week was rough going up against Buffalo, but 6 through 10 is actually a good little stretch of games. Then he's got a bye, and then it's a really tough fantasy schedule for the playoffs, the fantasy playoffs for him. But like you could take a Juwan Johnson and insert other tight end and just start to mix and match those schedules and get guys that you can stream as opposed to saying that like you're absolutely stuck. If you look through and you're saying, man, David Njoku just really hasn't been producing for me. The schedule doesn't get any better, but there's maybe 2 games there. Maybe you don't have to drop him, but I totally get the argument that these guys do become roster cloggers at some point.
And I think also just like paying attention to team trends and injuries. Like
Sure.
TJ Hawkinson, terrible in the first 2 weeks. And then Carson Wentz gets 2 starts, and he wasn't
Yep.
great by any means, but like TJ Hawkinson was very much so startable over the last 2 weeks. And then right now we're looking at Hunter Henry, like Kayshon Boutte is dealing with an injury, and Demario Douglas not even getting targeted right now.
It's
Hunter
wild.
Henry is like the de facto number one guy right now. Now, if Boutte gets healthy or Demario Douglas carves out a role, then we change that a little bit. But I think you just kind of look at like how are things going right now? Like Zach Ertz, when Jaden Daniels is healthy, we can look at him as a low end tight end one, but he has been dog water with Marcus Mariota out there. So I think it's just kind of like looking at the entire
Which
team
is
situation.
wild.
I
Sorry,
know.
like just it's wild because Mariota does love him, the tight
I
end,
know.
and there's no Terry McLaurin. Yeah.
Or dare I even say it right now? Like Cole Kmet is a full-time player and he has been getting heavily
Okay.
targeted. And like if you want to look at him as a streamer, it's worth it. But if Colson Loveland starts coming on, then you change the stance. So it's so hard. I think that like and I keep talking about these top six. My top six: Trey McBride, Brock Bowers, Tyler Warren, George Kittle, Tucker Kraft, Jake Ferguson. If you've got one of those guys, congratulations. You've got a plug and play tight end for the rest of the season. But even that, like what happens if George Pickens, cat's out of the bag, and then CeeDee Lamb comes back healthy, and then Jake Ferguson ends up taking a backseat to both of those guys. So I think you just have to play tight end in very short-term windows.
Could not agree more. Well, Dave, there we have it. The week 5 waiver wire pickups. It's kind of weird to say that we're already a good portion of the way through the season. What's the math on that? 4 weeks,
20,
right?
23% of the way through.
Sure. I'm just going to agree because I'm not good at math. So know who you're taking fantasy advice from. But we want to
23.5. I was close.
Did you do the math? Yeah, you did.
I
Good
did,
job.
yeah.
Good job. We're going to be back again later on in the week. We got the Wednesday Flex Show. We got the start, sits, and sleepers on Thursday as well. So as always, I want to thank everybody for watching or listening all the way through. For myself, for Dave, we'll see you next time. Adios.